Nothing contained in this podcast should be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. This content does not represent our respective employers and is purely the opinion of the podcast hosts. We are not your personal medical providers. Sorry, friends. So, if you have concerns or seeking a diagnosis or treatment, please seek individual advice from a healthcare provider in your area. We are not liable for any risks associated with acting upon the information contained in this podcast. This is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only, so enjoy the ride.
Please drink responsibly and in moderation. Before drinking, please be sure to be of the legal drinking age for your country. We do not encourage the misuse of alcohol.
Welcome to Medical Media Mixer, the perfect cocktail. I'm Nicole Peniston, psychologist.
And I'm Tara Prisco, physician assistant. All right. How's life?
Life is lifing.
It is.
As before you hit record, I was telling you, I did a whole lot of nothing this weekend.
So jealous.
Which was amazing, but now I'm regretting it because I'm very far behind work-wise. At this point in the week, usually I'm like starting on next week's reports.
Yeah.
Where I'm still doing reports that are due this week.
Ay.
So, yeah,
no fun.
It is what
but
it is. It'll get done.
You had a brain break for a weekend, and that's kind of nice.
I did. I had a brain break. I watched a lot of TV shows. I finished Bridgerton.
I didn't watch the second half yet.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
I know. I had to finish. I had started another show, so I had to finish that before I got into it.
I will say I have a major complaint, which has nothing to do with the plot of the show, and it was probably more of actor schedules, but I'm not going to give you a spoiler, but there is a major life event that every single Bridgerton, their asses should show up at this major event. Of
course, yes.
And 4 major ones are not there.
I don't like that. Yeah, that they don't come back for those things. I don't like that.
There's 3 of them that come back, but then aren't in this one particular scene. And I'm like, why the F not? This is super important. And they should have at least explained it away, oh, they're in the other room, or they'll be by shortly. And it's they just acted like nothing was different. I'm like, if this happened in my family and I didn't show, I would be in so much trouble.
Seriously.
Yeah. But I'm not going to give you a spoiler.
I mean, I think
it's technically two major life events where there's major people missing. And it's you're not going to explain that?
I've seen some still shots, so I'm pretty sure I know, but I'm not going to, I want to watch it.
Okay.
Yeah, I am jealous of your downtime. I had some downtime this weekend, but we also had dress rehearsal for competition team for dance. And this weekend we have our first competition, and which I will be at for over 12 hours. Yay!
That's so much fun.
Because we're in 2 sessions this time. So I have a 6:45 a.m. report time, and one dance, awards are at 12 something. Then the new session starts. We have a dance at 1:30, a dance at 2:30, but awards aren't until 6:30.
There's some times when I feel like I'm missing out by not being married and having children. And then there's other times like this where I am so glad.
Yeah.
Because no, that sounds terrible. It sounds terrible for the child. It sounds terrible for you.
Oh, she'll be running around with her friends having her best life in between dances.
At 6:45 a.m., she ain't running around doing nothing.
No. We're staying at the hotel because it's down LBI area. So even though it's just an hour, a little over an hour, I'm staying in the hotel because we got to get up, hair, makeup, the whole 9.
Yeah, you'd be too exhausted.
Yeah. So we're staying at the hotel the night before, but it's just, it's the dread of that long day ahead. And I know, so that's Saturday. Sunday, I am going to just lay in bed and make her bring me bonbons or something just because I did that for her.
Oh my goodness. You've definitely been watching some of Bridgerton if you're referencing bonbons. The French ones are the best.
Okay. I'm not a bonbon aficionado.
I can't say that I am. Just she says, the French and the German and the English ones. She prefers the French ones.
Oh, yes. I remember that. Yes.
I'm sure they're all delicious.
I'm sure all of them. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my weekend coming. Hopefully the following one, we have also another competition. Hopefully will not be as long.
Hopefully.
We will see. And that one is down towards Mays Landing, Absecon, Atlantic City-ish.
Is that the one before we go to BookCon?
I don't know. Is that the weekend after? No.
No, it's in April.
Yeah, because that other one's just a one day, so I know which day, and I know it's a one-shot one. So.
Nice.
I don't know. Exhausting children. At least the other child broke their foot, and I don't have gymnastics meets this season.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, except for she can't do any chores because she's on crutches.
She can do non-foot related chores like
Yeah.
folding laundry, like you
I
had her
told
do
you,
last
yeah.
week.
But she's like, I can't clear my plate because I can't carry it. I can't do because crutches. We'll see.
She's milking it.
Uh-huh.
And I don't blame her. I would do the same. The one major injury I had as a child, my mother didn't even believe that I had. And it was when I didn't know you. It was in 6th grade. I tore my ACL in gym class.
Fun.
And my gym teacher didn't believe me. So then I had to walk up the 3 flights of stairs to my locker and then down the 3 flights of stairs and then walk home. And then once I got home, this was at my old house. So then I had to walk up that big flight of stairs to my bedroom. And my mother didn't truly believe that something was wrong until the next morning when she saw me crawling in the hallway.
Oh, jeez.
To go to the bathroom from my bedroom, which was right next door. And then she was like, okay, maybe something's wrong. And then I found out I tore my ACL.
If I'm not like, especially when a kid doesn't bear weight on something, there's a problem.
I mean, I was a very dramatic child, but not that dramatic.
Crawling. Not that dramatic. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a little much.
And then she felt bad.
So. Shame on you, Deb.
Well, she definitely feels bad now because now we know the answer to all my aches and pains in my entire life that she always thought I was making up. So it is what it is.
Yeah. So before we get into my story today, I have a little sort of backstory sort of related to this. And I was looking up some facts to kind of concur with my memories of this.
Memories? We were like barely alive when it happened, right?
Well, so, okay. So
I don't think we were
Yes,
alive.
we were. It was 1986.
I didn't realize it was that late.
Yeah, it was 86.
I thought it was like 1981.
So for the listeners, this episode's about Chernobyl, but the little related story is
the wolves.
No,
I got all excited about the Chernobyl
is
wolves.
that my sister was treated for cancer as an infant or as a young child, and of course she had to go back and have all her checkups through the years. So she was diagnosed in 85, I believe. Was treated through 86, 87, and then was still going to things. But that particular hospital had a thing called the Valerie Fund, which did more than just treat the kids. They had a huge Christmas party where everybody would get gifts, the kids, their siblings, all different events, all different things. It was just a very cool, supportive environment. And so during that time in around 1990 or so, we met a family, this woman, Olga, and her son. They called him Vovo. I just looked this up. I'll tell you the details, but his real name is Vladimir, who had leukemia from Chernobyl and came to the U.S. to be treated. And I have my own vague memory.
Maybe we should clarify for everyone, Chernobyl was the town.
Right, where the nuclear meltdown happened.
Because I think like a lot of people think that was just the name of like the facility.
Right, yeah.
It was a
so
whole
that's
area.
The area. They lived close enough to that area. So he developed cancer a few years later. He came to the U.S. for treatment on some sort of a visa for that specifically. And from what I recall, this is just from my memory, that his mother was working at some point as like a housekeeper or a nanny, but she had previously been in like an accountant or something. He was getting his treatments. They were living in the U.S. The father was an engineer. He would come and back and forth, but still was mostly in the Ukraine. And, over the years, we would see them at all the parties. And my mom, she makes friends with everyone. And she has a very big heart. And so she was very kind to this woman who came to the country who didn't know anybody. And, we'd sit with them at the parties and all those things. And then I recall seeing something later on, years later, like a newspaper article or hearing through the grapevine that there was an issue because whatever extensions they had continued to get on their papers to stay here were going to expire and they were going to be sent back. But they were sort of fighting for like, he's going to need continued care throughout his lifetime. This is really an unprecedented thing. And for his family to be able to stay. And I remembered that vaguely. So of course, right before we signed on to record, I was Googling and I had to use like how I thought his name was spelled and, all these things to find it. But I was able to find the information that I know a New Jersey like senator was sponsoring him. And they did come up. I found a bunch of documents that it came up on Congress, like federal Congress, to try and get the parents and him to be able to stay. But I can't find in all these documents that I was quickly skimming what the end result was. Because this was in the later 97, 98-ish when that was happening. So hopefully he was able to stay. I'd have to deep dive further. If I find anything out, I'll throw it in the show notes. But basically it was a little personal piece of that most people probably would have never encountered somebody who their family was near there and this whole story. And so that ties into sort of why I would be interested in what kind of medical things happen from that event. So it's just like a little personal story.
So you're not interested in the Chernobyl wolves.
I've
For
heard
those who
about
are
them.
listening who don't know about them, Chernobyl, the town, basically had to be evacuated due
Right.
to stuff Tara will talk about. But wildlife infiltrated as
Yes.
everything grew over, and there are radioactive wolves that glow in the dark. Yeah. And I just find that fascinating. And they have like film footage, I guess from drones, I'm assuming that's how they got footage, because you can't really even step in the area due to the high levels of
Right.
radiation. But the wolves are now glow in the dark, which is amazing to me.
All right. Well, my drink looks like it's glowing in the dark. You can't see it on camera as much, but I'll text you the picture because hopefully it looks
like Mountain
good.
Dew.
It does. And it tastes
like Mountain
pretty
Dew.
Good. It does. And it's quite dangerous because it is called the nuclear meltdown.
I did see
and
that.
Henceforth, it has a butt ton of alcohol in it.
What is the metric weight of a butt ton?
It's a metric butt ton.
You answered that way too quickly.
Well, actually, there was something there's a quote in the TV show Dexter where the sister, she's like doing something, and I think she says like, I had a metric fuck ton, I think, of caffeine or something like that. But anyway, this has all the clear liquors that you even knew existed.
All the clear liquors.
All of them.
Including Everclear.
No, not that one, sorry.
So not all of them.
Half an ounce of gin, half an ounce of white rum, half an ounce of vodka, half an ounce of sweet and sour mix.
What are you doing after this?
Right. 5 ounces of lemon lime soda, half an ounce of melon liqueur, and half an ounce of white tequila. So there are I'm hitting my microphone. There are 3 full ounces of alcohol.
So I was looking up a recipe for a future episode, and I found one that sounded really good. And then I read all of the reviews, and all the reviews were like, I was leaning over the toilet for hours, like, this is too much alcohol. So I'm not doing that cocktail, but it sounds like you're going to have a similar experience.
No, I'm not going to chug this thing. Don't worry. But essentially you take everything except for the soda, shake it up, pour it over ice, and then top with the soda. I actually put a little extra splash of the Midori, the melon liqueur, to just make the color a little brighter because the color was a little more yellow than green.
So you're telling me you added more liquor?
But don't worry. Like I said, I'm not going to chug, and I have more
I'm not
Sprite
worried.
here
I'm
to
curious. I can't wait to see how you are at the end of this episode.
I know. Let me take a sip to get going.
Chug, 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 chug. There is a good amount of ice in there. Hopefully that'll water it down a little.
But I have to say, all of those liquors, because of the sour mix and the Midori or whatever, it's very late. Like, it doesn't taste as strong as it.
You're going to feel it tomorrow.
No, I have work, so. So we're going to cover the TV series first, Chernobyl, which was in 2019, which sounds weird to think about, like, before COVID. Things that happened before COVID. It just feels like so close to that.
Yeah.
But this was a 5-part historical drama on HBO, and it dramatizes the events leading up to and following the 1986 nuclear disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Soviet Union.
Speaking of documentaries about nuclear disasters, did you watch 3 Mile Island, which I think was also produced by HBO?
I have not.
That one? And that happened around the same time?
Yeah. So I'll go through, because there's 5 episodes, and I'll give you a very brief summary, very, very brief, of each episode, because the way it's sort of starts with the time. So the first episode is 1:23:45, like 1:23 a.m. and 45 seconds. So it opens in those early hours, April 26th of 1986, at that time, with a devastating explosion of Reactor 5, Unit 4, specifically at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The plant officials initially sort of downplay the severity of the blast. Firefighters, plant workers that are unaware of how lethal this was and the radiation exposure attempt to extinguish the fires. Meanwhile, Valery Legasov, who's a nuclear scientist, begins to understand like how serious this is and the implications of this. The next episode sort of starts to follow how the radiation levels spike well beyond safe limits, and Soviet officials send Legasov and Boris Shcherbenieva
Take another
I'm
sip,
sorry,
you'll get
people.
it.
Wow, there's lots of CHs and S's.
Just take another sip, you'll be able to pronounce it just fine.
Sherbina. We'll say Sherbina. It's lots of shs. A high-ranking government official to assess the situation. They learn the disaster is way worse than reported. And a physicist, Ulana Komyek, detects radiation readings hundreds of miles away, which is really the scary point. So we're not talking just in the immediate area, but how far this travels, which suggests that this is a complete major environmental threat. Efforts to stop a second steam explosion, which could spread even more radiation. They're trying to stop that. Desperate measures, including manually draining the water reservoirs under the reactor. Episode 3, trapped in darkness and facing intense radiation, workers on the plant floor push forward with dangerous manual efforts to prevent further catastrophe. Sherbina and Legasov begin to unravel systemic errors. They figure out what obstruction that contributed to the disaster. So like sort of the politics that made things a lot worse. And they, throughout this, I'm giving sort of the facts of the situation, but you get to know these characters, their home life, other people who are around. So you get to see the humanity of what's going on here and the people who are really actually trying to like save the world essentially, or save lives. So in this episode, particularly like personal tragedies sort of show the emotional weight of the crisis. Families try and make the decision of what they have to do, if they have to leave, and those kind of things. And then episode 4 is the happiness of all mankind. Legasov and Sherbina push for broader evacuation, larger exclusion zones. So that's what we have now, is basically an exclusion zone, right? Areas that nobody can enter. And they deal with the blunt reality that the earlier warnings about safety systems, like concerning the design of the shutdown button, were ignored by higher authorities. Cleanup efforts, including removing radioactive debris, fall on thousands of mostly volunteer workers to try and clean up this mess. And they were known as liquidators. And they themselves now face deadly radiation with inadequate protection.
But they were aware of that going in, volunteering?
I don't know how much the people really truly understood.
I mean, they knew it was a bad situation they were going to clean up. They just maybe didn't know the full extent.
Right. And that it's not just the here and now, but it could affect them for a long time. Mm-hmm. So in episode 5, it's called Vichnaya Pamyat. The final episode focuses on the trial.
Good job with the pronunciation.
My pronunciation. Who knows? I'm sorry. Anyone who's Ukrainian or Russian, I'm very sorry for my pronunciations. So that one focuses on the trial of the Chernobyl plant officials. So because of basically them allowing things and sweeping things under the rug and not following full safety protocols and sort of hiding how bad this was. So the people that this is focusing on, more names.
Do you want me to give him a shot?
Bryukhanov, Fomin, and Dyalatov, those are the people's names, were held responsible for the mismanagement and poor decisions leading up to the accident. And Legasov, the original guy we learned about, he testifies exposing omissions and lies that were propagated by the Soviet state. And his candid testimony costs him professionally, personally, and eventually leads to his suicide. The episode closes with a sobering reflection of sort of like what the truth is and the sacrifice that people like him made, and then the cost of the fact that they concealed this. Not sort of, they did. They pushed it under the rug. So the series really, like I said, it's very well done. I'm sure it won tons of awards. The acting is amazing. It really kept coming back to like the human side and the cost of actual lives because of the lies that were told. And it does show like how ordinary people, little scientists to firefighters to whoever, volunteers, risk their lives, and basically highlighted the institutional failures and the human costs of like risk of technology and things like that. So let's see if it says earning multiple Emmys and Golden Globes. I don't know how many. I don't have it written here, but it was excellent. Did you watch it at all?
I watched it, but it was probably like right when it came out, so it's not as fresh in my mind. But like I said, I did watch the 3 Mile Island documentary, I'd say within the last like 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure both of them did a good job, but I felt like the 3 Mile Island one did a really good job of like dumbing it down for like normal people, what
Right.
like a nuclear meltdown means, like
Right.
what that looks like, what a cleanup looks like. So like they
Right.
really explained it in a way that was accessible for a lot of people. But I
Right.
think also that's because it happens not far from where we live. And
Right.
Americans were not too smart with some things. I'm just being honest. Not all of
Yep.
us, but many of us are not. We're not taught these things in school. So it did a really good job of explaining it so people truly understood the severity of it. Like they
Right.
weren't trying to cover it up. So,
Right.
and I think because of Chernobyl, that's why they were just like, crap, well, we know this just happened
Right. We can't.
across the world. We can't ignore this. That's a whole, I'm not going to go
Yeah.
too into detail about it because it's a different story.
Right. I'm going to give you just a little of the technical of what happened. So essentially, during a late night shift, doing a safety test on that particular unit, engineers shut down critical safety systems and withdrew control rods from the core while the reactor was still operating at low power. And this combination of flawed technology and unsafe operations triggered an uncontrolled chain reaction. And that was the series of explosions that blew the reactor's steel and concrete lid off, exposing the core and then igniting these fires. So that's a little more of the technical. The explosion released large amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Winds carried it across Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and much of Europe. And initial attempts to conceal the accident delayed the evacuation, so people did not leave immediately. And that town, that Pripyat, which is where the plant workers and their families, was not even fully evacuated to more than 24 hours after the explosion. Over 335,000 people were eventually moved from the contaminated areas, and a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established around the plant. 2 plant workers immediately died during the explosion itself, and then dozens were first responders succumbed to acute radiation sickness in the weeks that followed. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, about the acute and then the long-term effects. Millions were exposed to varying levels of radiation. Long-term studies estimate thousands of additional cancer cases, especially thyroid cancer, among children attributable to the disaster. Forests, soils, and waterways were contaminated. So a massive concrete sarcophagus was later constructed to like surround it.
I love that word, sarcophagus.
Sarcophagus, I know.
It's a good one.
It is. To really encase the whole thing. And then a newer safe confinement structure was completed in 2019 to further contain it.
This is totally off topic, but Stellan Skarsgård is in it, who is also the father of Alexander Skarsgård and Bill Skarsgård. But Stellan is actually in a movie that I will be covering in the future that didn't even make it to my notes. But I was like, oh yeah, I got to do that one because he's good.
The Skarsgård family.
Skarsgårds.
So, I mean, they showed deep flaws in the Soviet industrial culture, secrecy, bureaucratic denial, disregarding safety things. And then it added to growing public distrust and eventually became part of the larger forces driving the political change eventually in the Soviet Union. And it did, like you're talking about 3 Mile Island, it did shape nuclear safety protocols, stricter regulations, improved designs of these actual reactors, and international monitoring like systems. Like we're all sort of watching each other to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Sorry, I'm making a face. My mouse died.
No.
I was like, what happened?
Dead mouse.
This kind of mouse, people.
Yes. Not the one you caught. Did you ever catch the one that was in your house?
He disappeared. There's no evidence of him anywhere. I feel like he knew that I set traps, and so he escaped.
Was like, peace out.
Yes. But it's for the best.
So we'll go through sort of the how this affects health in the short term, the long term. So the immediate aftermath in the first days to months, acute radiation syndrome developed in 134 emergency workers, resulting in 28 deaths among the approximately 600 workers involved in the immediate response. And they received extremely high radiation doses during the emergency operations. The accident released approximately 5,200,000. I don't know what this unit of measurement is. TBQ.
Curies. Remember when we did Radium Girls?
Curies, but TBQ is Curies?
It's I forget what the T stands for, but it's something curies. It's like a specific
Yes,
type
I remember we
of
did
curies.
like curies. Hold on. Let's
For some reason, the first thing that popped in my head was
TBQ.
tetrabytes of curies, but I don't think that's
gave
true.
me a Bible quiz homepage.
Bible, that's not what
I know, unit
of measurement.
of measure. It is a terabecquerel is an SI unit of radioactivity equal to 1 trillion becaquerels.
I was close. I said it was a tera something or a tetra.
Measures the rate of decay of radioactive source, with 1 TBQ representing 1 trillion nuclear transformations per second.
It's a lot.
My brain can't quantify that.
My brain can't quantify the difference between an inch and a yard because I'm special and I'm American.
So it released a whole lot of radioactive material, particularly iodine-131, cesium isotopes, cesium-137 and cesium-134, and about 220,000 residents were evacuated from the most contaminated areas. The primary immediate health concern was internal exposure through contaminated food and milk, which delivered radiation doses to the thyroid gland, which I guess it looks averaging, I don't know what this means either, MGYs. What are MGYs? Why are we using units of measure that I don't know?
It's moogies, MGYs.
MGY unit.
Yeah. You know what a moogie is.
A milligray. It's also an SI unit of absorbed radiation. So basically averaging 650 of those in Ukraine and 560 in Belarus among heavily contaminated populations. The long-term thyroid cancer in children, so that's the most significant long-term health consequence. It was a dramatic increase in thyroid cancer among children. And thyroid cancer, number one, is fairly common in adults, but very rare in children. And studies show that started a few years after the incident in children who received high doses or exposure. And the risk increased by a factor of 2 to 5 per one of those GUIs. These units are killing me. By 2005, apparently 7,000 cases of thyroid cancer occurred among the 2 million children living in the highly contaminated areas of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia, and especially high in children from 0 to 5. At the time of exposure, while no increase was observed in adults and that were exposed as adults. So it's interesting. It must be something about the way they uptake it more easily in that younger age. Children who were born after the incident showed thyroid cancer rates at background levels, confirming that the increase was clearly due to radioactive iodine exposure. And that has an 8-day half-life. So it sort of makes sense that, yeah, it wasn't continuing. It was only them being exposed, but their parents being exposed did not cause them to have their newer children to have problems. Rates of increased cancers was a little less conclusive. They just don't have enough information. But leukemia, which we talked about with that young boy, non-thyroid solid cancers, it's sort of like they don't know how much it really changed, so they can't really call that it's 100% directly linked to it. But the story was, like I said, that young boy who came here. I mean, obviously you can't say he wouldn't have gotten it without being exposed, but that was the story I heard back then. Among cleanup workers, those liquidators, some studies suggest that a dose-related increase in thyroid cancer, hematologic, which is blood, malignancies, and other solid cancers. They're saying modeling shows Chernobyl may have caused approximately 1,000 cases of thyroid cancer and 4,000 cases of other cancers in Europe by the early 2000s, representing about 0.01% of all cancers since the accident. So
I have a question. Part of this, I'm being 100% honest, I got distracted, so you might have said it. So people were getting cancer from direct exposure, but it wasn't being passed down from like mother to child.
So there is some information on that I will get to. There are talking about generational effects, but as far as those straight on cancers, thyroid cancer was children 0 to 5. Children born after the disaster did not have an increased risk, but those children who were 0 to 5 during that time period did. But there are other things that later, not just cancers, but other things. There is some generational stuff that they're studying. So some just
aside from the generational trauma of having to abandon your entire home because of an
life
accident.
Yeah. So there are other like non-malignant things that happen. So premature cataracts. So those are opacities in your lens of your eye. Follow low to moderate doses of radiation. Cardiovascular, cerebrovascular disease is increased among the cleanup workers. Endocrine dysfunction. So that's anything that is a gland. Endocrine would be your pancreas, your thyroid, your adrenal glands, all those fun things.
Huh. I ask people about endocrine problems every day, and I can really only think of like one or two. So now I've got some more context. Thank you for that.
So endocrine dysfunction, particularly thyroid disease, which you talked about, but not just cancer, but actual dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
And various other conditions, including blood disorders, gastrointestinal issues, and immunologic abnormalities. And then, as you just mentioned, the psychosocial effects, because,
yeah,
it's pretty darn traumatic. Adverse mental health effects have been substantial and persistent. 2 decades after the accident, studies have documented increased prevalence of depression and PTSD in emergency workers, which we know we've talked a little bit about, but like first responders and people who experience this as a rescue or an emergency worker, sometimes we don't always think about how significant their trauma is. I think we randomly talked about this once on the pod about baby Jessica and how the one rescuer who rescued her ended up later committing suicide.
Yes.
And so there's these things that we sometimes take for granted, like, well, you helped people, but the things you dealt with, obviously affect people more than we realize.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like, especially with like first responders or people like doing this cleanup, it's not like they went one day. They went like day after day after day for a very long time. And so I think it's also not just that initial trauma, that complex compounded trauma. And then like with Chernobyl, now not only are they learning more that they're exposed, that they're sick, but now worrying about our family has to move and my child is sick or my wife is sick or we've all lost our jobs. We have no savings. So it's like it just piles on top and on top and on top of each other.
Yeah.
And then you still have to wake up and go to work again.
Right. So they're saying, increased rates of poor self-rated health, anxiety, and some subclinical depression. And it, like you said, displacement, changes in living environment, and then the social economic disruption. So there's some inconsistent evidence, this is what we're talking about genetic effects among offspring of exposed individuals. This remains an area of further research. I know I have another section at the bottom more detailed about that. Let me go back to where I was though. So studies are showing that stable iodine administration reduced thyroid cancer risk by 2/3. So we understand that your thyroid uses iodine as just part of the way it works, right?
I had no idea. You're teaching me things.
That's part of why actually certain kinds of thyroid disorders are more common in places without iodinated salt. So in poorer countries who don't have iodinated salt, here you get plenty of iodine just in life. You don't need to do anything to extra.
Can I ask a dumb question? Are we putting iodine into shrimp or is it already there?
That's already in shrimp, but in salt we are.
No, I knew that. I was trying to think of other things with iodine, and shrimp was the only thing that came to mind, like off the top.
Yeah, I couldn't name a food particularly with iodine other than that, but yeah, it's in
salt. And my understanding is that it's in the veins of shrimp. So if you devein them, then you're not getting as much iodine.
I don't know.
I'm like, I don't know where I learned that, but it sounds good. So let's go with it.
Sounds good. We'll go with it. So what's happening is, remember that radiation was an iodine isotope, right?
Yes.
And so their body was just uptaking it like crazy. So by giving them regular iodine to compete with that, essentially, that decreased the thyroid cancer risk.
Did I make this up in my head, but do isotopes attach?
No, isotopes are slightly different forms of the same thing. Like
I thought it was something that like finds it and like globs on.
No, it's like different forms of the same thing. Like iodine, like I said, was like I don't remember the numbers, 137, 131, whatever. All those different numbers are different versions of it. So those are isotopes.
I know I'm thinking of something. I just can't remember the right word. But there's a certain word about like when you have something in your system and then this whatever finds it and attaches to it and like makes it expand. Kind of like how cancer cells like grow and grow and grow. It's something like that, but it's like if you have this in your system, there might be
a word somewhere that my brain knows.
I think it has taupe in it. Taupe attaches. I'm going to call it the taupe. Yeah, we're doing a lot of tauping. I'm not even drunk. I'm drinking water.
Fancy water.
Fancy water.
So, and if you had iodine deficiency at the time of exposure, that increased the risk because your body was just uptaking all of that iodine.
So the best bet would be to have too much iodine in your system at the time of exposure.
Basically, I mean,
probably wasn't happening.
Who could have planned? So the way that radiation causes cancer is it damages the DNA. inside the cells. When the radiation from Chernobyl passed through people's bodies, it created breaks and mistakes in their DNA and made those cells turn into abnormal cells because they didn't copy themselves appropriately and they copied bad copies and so on and so forth. Radiation's like powerful enough to essentially knock apart the molecules in your DNA. When radiation hits like a water molecule inside a cell, it breaks them into highly reactive particles called free radicals. So you've heard of that, right? Free radicals. It's also
Yes.
a singing group, right?
It is, but a word popped into my head. I don't think it's the word I was going for, but proliferation.
Yes, that's growing something.
Look, I was right. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So these free radicals then damage the DNA. Radiation can also directly hit and damage the DNA molecules themselves. And we know, just a little refresher, DNA is an instruction manual for how cells work and how to replicate themselves. So it creates different types of problems, can break the strands of the ladder, damaging like the actual building blocks of our DNA or causing pieces of the DNA to stick together incorrectly. And this damage then gets repaired by the cell's natural repair systems, but some of it gets repaired incorrectly or just gets missed. And so this next section I'm not going to go through because we already talked about how iodine uptaking. That's essentially what that is. Okay, let me find the section I wanted to do about generational. The reason the children were more vulnerable is because their thyroid cells divide and grow more rapidly, so they're most vulnerable to radiation damage, which makes sense. Everything about them is growing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And other cancers, we said leukemia, other cancers, very similar, just working in different areas like their bone marrow. Okay, here we go. So current evidence does not support a substantial transgenerational effect of parenteral, which means like usually in your body, radiation exposure from Chernobyl on a germline mutations in offspring. Though some studies suggest potential biomarkers of exposure at the molecular level. So there was a study that examined 130 children born to Chernobyl cleanup workers and found no increase in what they call de novo mutation rates. So despite their parents' gonadal doses, so their ovaries and their testes being exposed to these high levels, their whole genome like sequencing that they did showed no elevation in these mutations or changes in sort of the DNA there compared to unexposed populations. However,
and I'm a child because I laughed at gonadal.
Gonadal, I know. Gonads. Sounds like Beavis and Butthead.
I was going to say we are literally.
Hold on, let me have a little more.
Yes, have more of your drink. I still can't figure out why my mouse won't work.
You need a battery.
It's a Bluetooth, so
that still needs batteries.
No, there's literally no battery. You just plug it in and then it charges. And I've charged it.
You charge it. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
So, however, a 2025 study identified a potential transgenerational biomarker, these clustered mutations that showed a statistically significant increase that scaled with how much they were exposed to. And again, with these units of measure, the study found
make up a word. We're not going to know the difference.
2.65 cDNMs.
Sedenoms.
Per offspring. Oh, those are clustered de novo mutations. I'm sorry. I do have that answer right in front of me. Per offspring in the Chernobyl cleanup worker cohort versus 0.88 in unexposed families. So, I mean, I think we just don't know. I think we just don't have enough information. And who knows, like, how well we really can study and trace that back. We're talking now, how many years ago? 40 years ago.
Why you got to make me feel all old?
I know.
Rude.
So there's more, other studies basically conclude that evidence of the intergenerational effects is just inadequate. They just don't know. They found that heterogeneity between studies and limited like reproducibility, and they can't like if one parent's exposed and not the other parent, and like there's too many open factors. They really can't draw too much from it. But if there are true transgenerational effects, it's very small and it's very difficult to measure. Some other studies looked at the cells, the cytogenic studies, and they said increased chromosomal aberrations in children of exposed parents. They're saying liquidators compared to controls, those are the people who are really down in there, had higher levels with effects persisting regardless of the time between when they were exposed and when the child was conceived, but they're not really consistently repeated. These studies can't really replicate this. So it's very, very tricky. So no evidence exists for increase of congenital malformations. So we were talking about cancers, but congenital malformations. So that would be anything that forms in utero in children of either Chernobyl or atomic bomb survivors, which we have, Japan and things like that, atomic bombs. So it's interesting that they find some things on the genetic level, but not sort of on the macro level. So it's a little tricky for them to know, whether the absence of detectable like health things suggests whether that genetic change is still going to be passed down. And that's kind of the major medical stuff. So what do you so you said you remember watching the show. It was like dramatized. It was pretty good. I thought the acting was good. Do you remember like hearing about what Chernobyl was when we were kids?
Yes, but like I said before, for some reason I thought it like happened when we were much younger.
Yeah, we were online. I mean, it was about the same year as Challenger, so
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just because it's in another country, maybe that was why it didn't feel as imminent. Like I knew it was a big deal, and like I knew that there was some nuclear accident in Russia, and it was bad, and that people couldn't live there anymore. I would say that was probably the extent of it that I knew as a child.
Right, 6 years old. I mean, it's not like
yeah. Like I'm pretty sure I didn't know what a nuclear accident was. I just knew it was bad stuff.
But we know how to say nuclear and not nuclear.
I mean, some of us say it. Just nobody here.
Nuclear. My brain
But I'm going to throw something out there. I always heard nuclear in reference to the family type, but nuclear in reference to
it's all nuclear though. The spelling is nuclear.
I agree with you. I'm just saying.
Just a president of ours used to say it wrong.
I mean, our current president found out that whole starts with a W. We're talking about the whole pizza.
Stop.
Which honestly, that was pretty funny. When I saw that, I was like, "You funny, man."
Oh my goodness, I can't.
Yeah. Starts with a W.
So it's interesting. Like I feel like the reason I knew about it was just because I met that family. Like if I didn't know them, it probably wouldn't have been on my radar too much. And who knows? Like I said, if his cancer was 100% linked to it, I don't think there's a way to know. But hey, he got to come here and have standard of treatment in the US, where I'm sure it was better than where he was from at the time. And hopefully, I really need to Google more on this guy and see he's an adult now. Obviously, he's like in his 40s now. If he is around and he got to stay or not. I cannot find the answer. There's government links like .gov, but I cannot find the answer. Looks like there's a book though, The Chernobyl Children.
I'm sure there's more than one book.
So I wonder if it's in there. There's like all kinds of articles. Let's see if this actually says WE's program. I want to see if I do control find. No, control find apparently does. Oh, because it's behind a paywall. I can only read half the article.
Don't pay to read it. It's okay.
I'm not going to, but I really want to know what happened. I'm sure my mother would want to know. Send her on an internet deep dive.
I was going to say, make her pay to read the article.
No, but like send her on some sort of a this
internet
is like
hunt.
Yeah, it all kind of started in 97, and I see things in government links in up to 98 and 99. So I just don't know what the final outcome was. New Jersey legislature has like a resolution basically, that was signed, and then they presented it, I guess, to the federal government, and I see that, but I just don't see what I would think with all that they wrote here about this, that, for this one kid and his parents, that they would let him stay, but who knows?
Well, I'm just trying to think politically what was going on then. We weren't super anti-Russian at the time.
Yeah.
So maybe it was more likely to work in his favor. Because I do think like so much of that does have to do with politics and versus
this is the
like
House
just
of
a little kid.
Representatives. This is all the way up to year 2000. So I don't know. On October, they give the whole committee. It's a whole committee that it went a congressional committee, but it doesn't say in the end what they decided.
They decided to decide later.
Sure, they have all this stuff. They even have that the father was a communist, like part of the Communist Party, but he said he only had to do that to keep his employment, and that he really doesn't believe in it and all that, and which I believe,
Yeah, that I mean,
and they
I
even
feel like
put
that was
what
common.
the incomes of the parents were here and what they're working as here. They gave a lot of interesting details, but they just don't. Yeah, he was born in 1984, so he's about a year younger than my sister. Yeah, he came to the U.S. in 92. No, the father came in 92. The kid came in 90. I don't know. It does not give me an end to the story. Vovo, if you're out there.
I want to call it a happy ending that Vovo got his treatment. He got to stay. They got to stay after.
He grew into a nice young man who has,
who has
a good
a
life.
family of his own and a good life and a good job. And his parents got to stay because good people deserve good things.
Well, his legal name's Vladimir, so maybe I'll have to start like Facebook searching for under his real name and see if I can find him.
You're so old, Facebook searching.
Well, but he would be old too, so that would be a good way to
not
find
as old as
him.
you.
All right, LinkedIn. I found someone by his name on LinkedIn.
My goodness.
Ramapo College, that's New Jersey, so that could totally be him.
You are live stream stalking this man.
Wait, hold on. A medical technologist. No, I think that's him.
Oh my goodness.
It looks like, he was a child, but medical technologist in Florham Park.
I was going to say, don't say his last name. Protect his anonymity.
You can literally Google New Jersey boy, leukemia, Chernobyl, and find him.
We're not going to dox this man.
All right. But it looks like he's on LinkedIn and still lives in the U.S. according to when I Googled his legal name now, not his nickname.
Well, good for him.
So we're going to say he's good. Yay.
The odds of him listening to this are extremely slim, but if they are, I'm so happy for you.
If I got my sister or my mother to email, they totally would.
But if he is listening, I am so happy that you've decided to stay in New Jersey. I hope all is well, and you inspired Tara to talk about Chernobyl today.
Seriously. And I drank 2/3-ish of my drink. I don't know if all the alcohol's at the bottom or if all of a sudden this is going to smack me in the head. We will find out on our second recording.
I was going to say, we'll see how disruptive you are to my story. That'll tell us.
Wild and crazy. I have to tell you, one of my friends, who's a drug rep at work, he listened to this episode, our last episode that came out.
I was going to say, how does he listen to this episode?
He listened to our episode that came out this week, the ALS episode, and he said, "Is your friend always that funny?"
Seriously, okay. So real talk. I don't really have the best self-esteem. And I listen to these episodes and I crack myself up. And I'm like, that girl is hilarious. I'm like, oh, that girl is me.
I said she just slips them in. She just slips in those one-liners.
I try.
Gets them through. It's that quick wit.
Yes. Well, I have had other people say that we are funny and they enjoy us. So
yeah, it was just funny. He's like,
more
always
people.
Been that funny? I'm like, well, I wouldn't do a podcast with her if she was boring.
Oh my goodness. I think it just come naturally. You've met both of my parents and they are very similar.
Yes.
In order to keep up in my household, you either had to be on top of it or you fell behind real fast. So, yeah.
All right. Let's close it up. Thank you for listening to Medical Media Mixer.
The perfect cocktail. Cheers. Cheers with my clearly Canadian TM. This is not an ad, but if they'd like to sponsor us.
They still make that?
They make it in cans now.
Nice.
And it's just as delicious. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Medical Media Mixer podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps others find the show. Want to keep the conversation going? Follow us on social media. We're at Medical Media Mixer Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and on Pinterest, the Medical Media Mixer board.
If you'd like to support the show and help us grow, check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast. And on Buy Me a Coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast. If you have a topic idea, feedback, or just want to say hi, send us an email at medicalmediamixer@gmail.com. You can also stream all of our episodes and find more info on our website, medicalmediamixer.podbean.com. We're available on all major podcast platforms, so no matter where you listen, we're there. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep mixing medicine and media.